Previously on agentpalmer.com, Palmer's trek continues with Star Trek Generations. Jetlag the game is worth the price of subscription, and somewhere out there in the wilds, I hope Amber is relaxing on her horse. This is the Palmer Files, episode 122, with Kelly, Jimmy, Travis, Chris, Tony, Zapata, and my dad, discussing the past, the future, anxiety, technology, passion, friendship, and more from the one final question after credits of this very podcast. Are you ready? Let's do the show! And welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 122nd episode are Kelly, Jimmy, Travis, Chris, Tony, Zapata, and my dad. What you are about to hear is One Final Question, Volume 4, this time spanning episodes 76 through 100, which conveniently picks up where Volume 3 ended at 75. As with previous volumes, you will not be hearing all 25 questions, just a select few. For some of you, you've heard all of these before because you listened to every episode all the way through until it is completed. For others, you may have missed one or two of these because either you don't listen until the episode is completely done, or you weren't listening at the time. Maybe you're a new listener. No matter the reason, I encourage you to enjoy this trip through what is, what was, and what could be. The criteria for selection remains my whim. Some questions were too relevant on having heard the entire episode prior to it. Those didn't make the cut. These selections should all stand on their own. You will hear guests ask me about my future and my past, anxiety and passion, friendship, and more. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all contact links for each guest in the show notes, as well as links to each episode these were pulled from. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Kelly, do you have one final question for me?
I do. So one thing I've been kind of wondering, talking to you, is where do you see yourself headed? So say 5 years from now, what are you going to be doing?
I mean, I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I've been, I guess, self-employed for the better part of just before the pandemic. And I bounced from gig here to gig there and spent a lot of time networking. And I've said this before, people, when they're trying to help you, when you're networking, will say, what do you want to do? Because they need some direction. They can't help you. They can't, like, if you want to be a doctor, they can point you in a direction. You want to be a teacher, they can point you in a direction. You want to be a marketer, a writer, a director, whatever, they can point you in a direction. The worst thing you can say to somebody who wants to help you is, I don't know. And that's still my answer. Because I think that I am blessed and cursed with too many options. And so in 5 years, I would like to make sure I'm still paying my bills and contributing to the household. My partner makes more than me, but she's got a full-time job. I do not. And so I just want to be able to contribute in some way, financially. As far as like emotionally or like metaphysically or whatever, like I get to create. As far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to create, and I can't not. Call it a fault, call it a plus, a minus, or whatever. Like, if I'm not, I like the blog has kind of manifested itself as I'm creating something once a week, or sometimes twice a week. The podcast has kind of amped that up. So now, it's 6 times a month I'm putting something out into the internet. And it's come up on this show before. I'm a very big believer in trying to balance the ledger of content created versus content consumed. And I know it's never going to be 50-50. As humans, we consume too much to be able to literally put out that much stuff. Right. I had insomnia last night. So I consumed, I don't know, 5 hours of TV while my partner was sleeping and just watching stuff. So clearly I can't. And today I wrote a blog post. I don't know what that equates to in hours of like consuming. And you and I are doing this podcast, which is going to record for about an hour and a half, and I'll edit it down to 115 or 109 or whatever it ends up being. I'm not hitting 50-50, right? I strive to. It's never going to happen. So, but I still need that outlet. And I have, I'm a strike while the iron's hot kind of guy. This 4 days ago, I wrote 2 posts because I was inspired and I had either watched the right things or read the right things, or I had an idea of a thing I wanted to write. But just knowing that my skill sets open all these doors for me is as exciting as it is scary, because I have to pick a door. Right. Yeah. And so I helped produce a movie. It's, as we speak, it's in production. By the time this airs, it'll be close to the end of our production. And I mixed the sound on it only because I've been messing around with podcast sound, right? Like, these are skills I have, didn't know that they were applicable there. Mm-hmm. But now I know that I could produce a small budget movie. And I know that I can produce a podcast and edit a podcast and a blog. And I've edited a book of poetry, and I've edited a short story, and I've edited a novel that I'm going to beat the author over the head until we actually publish said novel. But all of those things are vastly different, and yet they still all fill my soul, like my creative soul. Like, I don't have to do it. Like, that's the other thing I learned. Like, I don't have to do the thing. I can just be a part. I can be a facilitator, and that's good enough for me. Like, I'm helping with this movie. I'm a producer, but I'm not editing it. I didn't shoot it. I'm just there to facilitate it into the world. And that's fulfilling enough for me. But it also means that people don't know what I do, because all of the things that come to my mind when what do you do? Not what do you want to be? That's the harder question. What do you do? I just get to be vague. Like, I'm a blogger, because then they go, well, what do you write about? Or how often, or whatever. Like, I'm a podcaster. Well, who do you talk to? And if I say I'm a producer, they go, well, what do you like? No one knows what those, like, producer, blogger, podcaster, even editor. These things are vague concepts to most people. If you're not doing them, you have no idea what I just said. I just said 4 words. And so I have all these options. I would like to help people, generally speaking. I've done a lot more for people than I have for money. I'm not like a bottom dollar kind of guy. Like, I mean, I think those around me know my worth a lot more than I do. And it could be an introvert thing. I don't know, because it's not a thing that happens. Like, I help people when I can, and that's good enough. And maybe my privilege is showing, because, like, I had saved for a very long time while I was employed, and so I can weather these kind of storms and carve out a life for me. But in 5 years, I guess, as long as I'm helping people or I'm still doing this stuff, it would be cool to maybe find the next bigger thing, which is new, right? The movie, I had a friend who was doing it all by himself, and I was like, I think I can help you. He's like, I don't think you can. And I was like, no, I really think I can help you here. And so, you know, and that will probably be an episode on this show to come when we release it, and we get to tell the story about how I helped him. But I think now I'm looking for the next the next step up, let's say. And I don't know what that is. And the blog just kind of came to me one day. The podcast I had been teased about for a long time because I was being on other people's shows and I was producing other people's shows. I wasn't doing my own. And then I finally took that step. And the movie, that was just kind of happenstance. It's like being in the right place at the right time and saying, I'm going, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to help you anyway. And my best friend's the writer of poetry, and I'm always going to be available for him as an editor. And I think that I just I'm here for the creative space. And not a lot of money in it, right? Like you got to be in the 1% of the 1% of the 1% to make a living doing all of the things I just described. But as long as there's a roof over my head, and I get to eat and there's plenty of coffee around, I'm good. Like, I think I've set my, I don't know. I'm not looking forward to like, one day I'll release my own movie studio or whatever. Like, no, I don't think that big. But that's, so I guess, I'm going to put up my sail, and wherever my boat goes,
I love that.
I hope I'll be prepared for it.
I love that because I 100% relate. It's just creating and helping people.
And I will say this, having been in marketing and around marketing, and the pandemic taught me a lot from afar because I wasn't employed. So I got to watch people get overworked, and I got to watch, budgets and staff get cut. And I got to learn the value of storytelling in a way that I still don't think people value yet the way they should. Mm-hmm. And it's, people look at marketing as it's just the message, but not anymore. We live in a world where any YouTuber may have, any random YouTuber that, does it for full time might have more followers than the brand of soft drink you're drinking potentially. And so what does that mean? They tell better stories than the brand? Probably. And so for me, I'm starting to think it's all about storytelling. It's also about posturing a little bit, but I don't want to play it's a statement I make a lot. I don't want to play the game. Like, do you want to hire me? Oh, you want me to jump through hoops? No, I'm not. That's somebody else. That's somebody younger. That's somebody who really wants a career. I just want to help you tell your story. Mm-hmm. You don't want that? That's fine. Good. Have fun. Like I'll find a way. It's good. But I think back, and I think that, and you will find this the more that you kind of get out there, not as a salesperson, but just looking around at what everybody else is doing, and you go, oh, wow, they need my help, but they don't know that.
Right. And
most of those people are too proud to say they're wrong. That's a whole different ballgame. But it's just, I guess I'm just here to help people. Well, I guess that's an imperative. I don't want to make it a question, but very much it's, I don't know, question mark.
I think it's okay to not know. That's like kind of the spot I've been in my whole life, I think, is not really knowing and being up for change whenever it comes.
I mean, that's how you end up with a liberal arts degree.
It's so true.
All right, Jimmy, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah, let's try this one on precise. And we cannot go down this road if you don't want to go down the road. But one of the things that I and many other people I know who are creative struggle with is like anxiety about the creative process, about the outputs, about being criticized, just anxiety as a big, scary, hairy ball of stuff.
Yeah. And
I'm curious what tools or techniques, if any, you use to manage that for yourself.
I suffer from what I will call social anxiety to begin with, which is completely and utterly unrelated to the creative process. I think to answer the question, I have to go back. In high school, I was a creative person, right? I was writing poetry, a few short stories. And in college, I wrote for the school paper and, kind of got out there, right? And you did a few social things, student government and all that stuff. And then I was working in retail for like 7 years and after post college. And that at that time, somewhere in there is when something snapped and I became riddled with anxiety for socially. Right. And I worked through it. And I don't take any medication. I don't necessarily think it's the greatest idea that I don't take medication, but it's my process, right? Like it's how I work through it. And so everything else is super easy by comparison, right? Like if I put out a blog post and somebody's like, "Oh, you misspelled something." Right. All right. Well, you read it and I'll change it. Like that's fine. You got something wrong in your podcast. All right. Well, I can't change that, but thanks for listening. Right. And I think that part of it is because of the social anxiety. The other stuff is, so small to be insignificant. However, I will say it wasn't always like that. I think that's me answering this question in 2022, where the blog is 10 years old and the podcast is over 2, maybe 3 years old. I don't pay attention anymore. It's probably 3. But I guess the answer is 10 years ago or 11 or 12 years ago when I started the blog, publish might have been a little bit more anxiety ridden, even given all the other social stuff, because I'm putting something out into the world. But when you have a blog for more than a decade and you've hit published more or less every Thursday for that entire decade, the anxiety starts to go away because you're so used to putting something out there into the world. Right. And so any feedback, I'm just thank you for because both of these things are passion projects, right? Yeah. And so it's just a thrill that somebody took the time, right? And it doesn't matter if you're my best friend or my father or a stranger, you took the time to listen or you took the time to read. And so in that regard, the anxiety is a lot less. Also, for better or worse, and I do have I guess what you would call a team of editors, right? I have a bunch of friends who I throw drafts to before I hit publish just so somebody else can see it. But it still all lies with me, right? So I don't have a team. If I feel comfortable enough to hit publish on anything, it's met my standard. Right. And I know obviously we're all human. Nothing's 100% going to be perfect all the time, especially when you do it weekly for more than a decade, right? Like, of course I got some stuff wrong and of course there's still misspellings and, but the other part of it is, and this is the important piece, you could still read my first blog post. I've grown. I don't take that shit down. Like that stuff's out there. And it's also for me, a couple years ago when I had the 10-year, when I wrote about the decade. And it was literally like an offhand comment to my main editor. Chris is one of my best friends. He's my main editor. He edits most of my stuff. And I was like, 10 years is coming up, but I don't know if I'm going to write about it. And he's like, I will come, because he lives about 90 minutes away. It's a drive, it's a haul, but he's like, I will come down there and punch you. You're gonna write about this, right? And so I think there's also a part of it where it's like, you look back. I did a special thing for 300 posts. Why 300? Why not? Because I missed 250 and I didn't. Well, whatever. But you don't pay attention to milestones until they're there. Yeah. And I'm not a big anniversary or celebration guy to begin with. Just in general, because I'm always on to the next thing. I don't want to wait. So I've taken the time occasionally and I look back and I see, maybe the word count's gone up and then gone down and then gone back up and then gone down or average. And, or I wrote a lot about, there were a lot of music reviews and there were a lot of book reviews and there were a lot of movie, and now it's kind of balanced out or whatever. Like it changes, and it's interesting to follow along. But you know, if anybody out there who's just hearing this for the first time wants to go back to my blog, you can see the entire evolution. You could pick random pages from 1 to whatever I'm up to now and see what you've done. Yeah.
And that's great. That's amazing. I mean, you built sort of a living archive for yourself, right? You sort of, without unintentionally, wrote your own biography through it.
It kind of, and I do wonder too, like occasionally I write like, quote unquote, from the desk of Agent Palmer, right? In order to just write about something that's not consumed or not an event or not something that happened. I don't know. I know there's like, I'm friends with like mommy bloggers who, that's what they write about. They write about their life. I write about my life maybe twice a year. Right. Yeah. So it's not something I do often, but I think the anxiety for publish diminishes. Like there very much is a diminishing returns with how many times you hit the publish button. And I think that answering the question now, like, my other anxiety is part of it because it dwarfs anything that the internet can throw at me. You know, when I get heavy breathing and nausea because I'm in a strange place for the first time, I have to I have to do my things to get through that. That's nothing compared to accidentally hitting publish on something and being like, oh, oops, I didn't mean to do that yet. Like, let's bring that back. Let's put that back in. I mean, but at the same time, the first publish book, blog, podcast, it doesn't matter. The first one, that's nerve wracking. The second one, you've been here before. Okay.
You've been here before.
The third, the third one, the fifth one, the 100th one, it's still nerve wracking, right? Because you're still putting a piece of yourself out there. Like I don't spend years with my projects, but I do spend hours with them, which I guess would be the equivalent.
Well, it adds up.
Right. So
no, it's the same thing, same muscle.
Yeah. And so, there's a part of it that's like, oh man, like I'm still doing, that's the other thing. Like I'm still doing this.
Yeah.
And I'm still, I still get nervous before every podcast. I don't get nervous hitting publish on the blog anymore, but the nerves before this is live to tape basically. Right. But the nerves tell me I should still be doing this. Like the day the day I get on mic and I'm not nervous, I feel like that tells you something. Okay. And I think you should listen. Like, does that mean I need to take time away? Does that mean I need to stop? I don't know. And I think that's for ourselves to figure out. But I'm fascinated by process, and my process has evolved. It's not the same. Like I have one that works, but they all still change. And and I mean, I don't know about your writing process, but I will tell you, like I've turned into a strike while the iron's hot kind of a guy. So I could sit down in a weekend and maybe have 3 good ideas and write 2.5 of them. And then I could go 2 weeks where it's like, I have to write something. What's it going to be? I don't have that inspiration, but you get me that first line and I'm gone. Yeah. I just need the line. Right.
That's amazing. That was an amazing. I'm so glad we went down that rabbit. That was like the best. I mean, yeah.
Well, and
you can cut out my effusive praise after, but that was amazing.
No, well, I could keep it in because I'll tell you this. I get questions about the creative process often enough that just like going back and reading my first blog, listen to, I mean, I would like you to listen to all of my episodes, but if people ask about the creative process all the time, especially in the one final question, and I always have a different answer because I'm always in a different place, obviously. So like my answers evolved. And if we have this conversation again in a year or 5 years,
which we should,
it'll change. And I think it's part of what you were talking about where like doing the project changes you. Yeah. Well, continuing the project also, it doesn't have to just be like one static project. Like a dynamic or an ongoing project will also change you. So
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. I also don't know to what end, which I guess is it's it's a massive plus because I don't know where I'm going, but I also don't have an end. So I don't know.
That might be a good thing. The end is itself. I mean, it's the sort of that's it's not a bad thing to not have an end. It means that your reasons for doing it, the consistency, it has a lot of integrity that way.
And for right now, I'll just keep on keeping on.
Keep it on. That's great.
All right, Travis, do you have one final question for me?
All right. So it's a theoretical question.
Okay.
Semi-serious. If there was one big technological advancement that's happened in the last 20 years that you would remove, what would it be?
Broadband. Or Wi-Fi, one of the two. I want to bring the speeds back. I as much as I think that it's a great thing that like I can be lazy, sit on my couch and not have to get up and put a DVD in. I feel like that it allows people to take for granted the speed and the accessibility that we have. And having grown up in an era where, 14-year-old me could choose between dial-up, maybe kind of playing a lag infested game of Quake with some friends, or going out and actually playing Capture the Flag. Like I'm glad that I had that, because 14-year-old me went out and played Capture the Flag with my friends. Yeah. Because if it was raining, we would play lag infested Quake, or we'd have a LAN party where you could literally mess with your friends while you're playing with them. But I think that one of the big things that in my personal life that comes up a lot is community and how it's gone. And a lot of things would be solved if community came back. Well, as long as people are comfortable creating their own community of people that they may or may not really know, that aren't really around them to help them, let's say, move or have a meal with, I feel like we've kind of destroyed our community in a sense. And I feel like if we got rid of Wi-Fi and we got rid of broadband and we made it slow like it was, people might go out more. Yeah. Or they might do the other thing.
Would you be okay with the cost of giving up the podcast? Because, I mean, it's kind of like predicated on having that technology available, right?
I mean, the blog is the same way. I mean, yeah, I could turn the blog into completely text.
Get those GIFs down real small. Yeah. You can make the blog work.
And look, my entire professional career has been based off of digital marketing, right? Like so I need a new job, profession. Yeah.
But it would be worth the cost to you.
I think it would because I would not be alone. Like I'm at the height of the pandemic. I have a friend, very good friend, like best friend. I went to high school with him. He lives a few blocks away from me, which is unique because we didn't always live in the same town once we graduated high school. And during the pandemic, I made him come over for dinner once a week. I was like, you live alone in an apartment and I'm not letting you stay alone in an apartment for long periods of time. At least once a week, you're coming over here where me and my partner can host you. We can have dinner. We can get takeout. It doesn't matter. We'll just socialize.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough people, not saying like me, but I don't think there's enough people making an effort for the social aspect because they think that the digital is enough. And I, as much of an introvert as I am, as much as I very much love my setup, we still need social interaction, like real social interaction. And I feel like there's a part of me, while this is a hypothetical, I feel like if that never goes away, I don't know if that social aspect ever really comes back.
Yeah. And I feel like there's kind of like two parts going on to it too, because you're right. This loss of like person to person, very present interaction.
Yeah.
But there's this other side that I think we got out of this, which is people being able to find people out in the world and connect to people that they would never have been able to connect with at all otherwise.
I'm completely going to admit to you that Stephanie, who lives with me and moved in with me, I met on Twitter through a podcast that we were both listening to. So if I shut everything down, we never meet.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand that, but and it's not like a sacrifice I'm willing to make, because obviously I'm shutting I'm in this. I'm presuming that I'm turning it off now, not turning it off before. But there are instances where that happens, and I've got friends, very close friends I've never met. Right. Because I still talk to them, because I'm still like, I'm going to call you on the phone. We're going to talk.
What we need is like the purge, but for broadband, just once a week. All broadband is off.
That could be. Yeah. I mean, I'm amenable. I don't need to hit the button and completely turn it off forever. But
day.
Yeah, I want it. I don't want to be alone. Like, I don't want to feel like my efforts to be like, I'm not doing it for everybody. Like, I want to state that right now, but I kind of know the names of most of my neighbors in my neighborhood. Feel like that makes me a rare person. But I don't know. We rely too much on it, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, it's very easy to have as a crutch. And everybody got even more entrenched with COVID, because there was that solid day-to-day reason not to interact with anybody. And then you get comfortable with it. This happened with my kids, right? You do go to homeschooling. So they're all at home. They're on Zoom all day. They don't see any other kids. But you become accustomed to being able to interact that way and to be able to check out when you want to. In all ways, the pressure can be taken off at any moment. And it becomes very easy to be comfortable with that and hard to go back. So when the kids had to go back to school, it's like, oh my God, I could be on in front of all of these other people, and they're bumping into me, and they're invading my personal space, and I'm not in my pajamas, and, I can't look over at YouTube when the class is boring. It was just like this big shock going back. They didn't wanna. They didn't like, nobody liked being cooped up at home, but there were aspects that they got really accustomed to that was very difficult to give up.
And they're things that you and I never would have considered. Like, I remember being in a boring class and attempting to sneak a magazine in front of me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and God forbid you get caught, but like that was the chance. That was our YouTube window.
Yep.
And so it was.
There was also other like little weird structural things. I don't want to get too far off, but like, when you are that decoupled from like in person, if you're done with your work in a class, you can get the work done in another class. And so they were always done with school by the time school was over. There was never like homework, because the amount of dead time traveling between classes, or when you're done and twiddling your thumbs for the bell, it all evaporated. It all got used for other things. Yeah. So there was this massive optimization of time. Maybe it still wasn't the best use. Homeschool is not, Zoom school is never going to be a patch on the interaction of real school, but there were things that were like time benefits that they really acutely perceived.
I think that's the other thing. I think it goes back to why I turn it all off is not all optimization's good. Being bored has value. Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to acknowledge when you have a phone and you can entertain yourself at literally any second, at any time, in any way you want. So it's very hard to acknowledge, but because it's so comfortable to be able to entertain yourself. I mean, just somebody being able to sit through a movie, if it's got a slow bit, it's like, just a second, I'm going to check my tweets. That was a boring scene. Oh, no, it's back? Okay, cool.
I try to, my Fitbit died a couple months ago, and I haven't replaced it because I like the idea that if I put my phone down, I'm actually disconnected.
Yeah.
Or if I leave it in the next room. It's not going
to vibrate on your wrist.
Yeah. It's not vibrating on my wrist. And if I actually leave it in another room and there's a slow part in whatever we're watching, I'm stuck watching the slow part.
Yeah.
Like, that's just.
My phone is perpetually on Do Not Disturb. I've never turned it off. It's always on Do Not Disturb. So it only says anything to me when I pick it up and look at it. At the very least, the onus is on me.
All right, Chris, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah. So we made a movie.
Yeah.
What do you want to do next?
I mean, creatively, right? It's a very weird question for me, okay? Because I do the blog and I do the podcast, and that's what I create. And when it comes to bigger projects, I help you with the movie, obviously. I edited a book of poetry, and I'm in the process of editing another book of poetry for the same author, and I will literally kick his ass to make sure that I get to edit his novel, which has been drafted, and it's just about drafting it again, right? And
that's new information to me too, because I know the author. But keep going.
So I'm also helping someone. I'm reading a rough, what I will call rough thoughts from another friend who's thinking about creating a memoir, and I want to help them kind of facilitate that.
But what do you want to do with me next?
Okay, well
that's a different question.
That's a different question, right? So, but I feel like it's whatever you want to do. Like, and this is what, and this the reason I list all that stuff, right? Because like
right.
I feel like despite the blog and the podcast, I still look at myself as the man in the chair and not the man.
Oh, you are totally my Ned.
So in that regard, what's next? It's the book of poetry. It's potentially the novel. It's potentially a memoir, and it's whatever you bring to me. Like I'm here for it. And like I've talked on the show about maybe dabbling into video, and really it's just a means to learning to apply it to other things. It's not really because I yearn to be in video, right? Like it's just another skill to add to the quiver. But for me, what's next is whatever, honestly, it's you and I talk every day. And a lot of the time we talk about what's bothering us or what we're working on right now. But sometimes we do get those moments where nothing's going on. We just throw shit at the wall. And whatever's next will come from whatever sticks in the long haul.
Yeah.
And that's the truth is I'm okay with whatever it is. I joke that it should be fiction because we'll be able to control the narrative, which is not something we could do with the documentary. The documentary was tell the story. This is how it begins and this is how it ends.
Yeah.
Enjoy getting people from A to B. I like the idea that you can.
So you would craft a story.
I would love the idea of us to start with a straight up writer's room and go from there.
Fair.
Now,
well, if you decide to get into video, I know a guy who made a movie.
All right, Tony, do you have one final question for me?
I do. As I mentioned to you earlier, while I was sculpting, I was listening to a number of your episodes and I was really digging them, and I was just one after the other putting them on. And I realized one of the reasons why that is because of your passion. And I heard it from episode to episode, and I heard it tonight when we were talking to each other. You are passionate about not only the topics that we're discussing, but about everything having to do with, I can tell just when you talk about the podcast, when you talk about your blog, these are passion projects for you. So my question is, if you ever lose that passion for the blog or for the podcast, would you just stop doing it? Or would you feel like you had some kind of imperative that you have to keep doing it either for your listeners or readers, that you feel like it's something that you have, even though you don't like to do it anymore? Or would you be true to yourself in that sense and say, well, I want to move on to a new project?
I'm gonna steal some lines from Christopher Knight, Val Kilmer's character in Real Genius. No, I have no moral imperative to keep going. It is all about the passion for me. I think that the blog, I'll say this for both of them before I answer the rest of the question. Part of the reason that the passion remains high is because I have learned patience a little bit in the publishing aspect.
Mhm.
I publish my blog once a week. I publish this podcast every 2.
Yeah.
6 times a month, I hit publish on something, which means that I'm not burnt out.
Right.
I have the ability to work ahead. I have the ability built in because I can work ahead. You know, I can sit down in a weekend and write 3 posts because I felt inspired. And then I can go through a non-inspiration period and still not miss a beat. And I think that those periods of built-in breakdowns, those periods of mental block or I'm just not feeling it today, allow me to keep the energy level high when I do create the thing. At the very least, that's the way the blog is. For the podcast, on a at least weekly basis, if not daily basis, I find the inspiration to do this show because I'm a telephone person.
Okay.
I don't need to video call you for anything. I have no problem being phone pals with you.
Right.
I'm not going to text you. I'll text you if you know, are you in a meeting? No. When you say no, know that your phone's going to ring, right? I'm a talker. And I think that I hate the idea that the conversation you and I just had is something that later generations younger than us won't experience. Because this is a conversation that you and I, despite the 3 years in difference in our age, you and I could have had this at 10, 20, 30, and now 40, right?
Yeah.
At any point. And it's because of when we grew up. It's because of, we're similar, but we still talk to each other. We still talk to people. I'd be willing to bet you have conversations like this with other people.
I mean, as a professor, I'm constantly talking too. And one of the best ways to teach, in my opinion, are conversations.
And that's, I have experienced that as a student, you may walk into a class and it sounds like people are just yelling, but sometimes they're debating and that's how they're going to learn more effectively. At least, it's one of the ways I did. And so for the podcast specifically, when I see something boiled down into a 30-second or a 1-minute clip, there's a lot more that happened. There's so much more that went into that, and you're taking bits out of context. And I want the long form conversation to come back because it allows for context, it allows for nuance, it allows for meandering. By the way, we didn't answer every question we asked of each other, but we had a fun journey as the conversation went on, right?
Oh man, it was a trip. It was a journey, our conversation tonight.
And I don't want that to go away. I'm basically sticking my flag in the ground and going I don't want this to die. And if my podcast is the last bastion of that, then it is. But there's a flip side to that, which is I don't let my conversations go for 4 hours because I think there's also a limit to their usefulness. And so it's a balance. But when I see things get broken down into bite-sized content, which is basically all we're surrounded by, it gives me more impetus to be find somebody interesting that I can have a conversation with and talk to them for an hour and see what happens.
The internet and technology and specifically social media has been pushing us to talk less and to share less. It's becoming shorter and shorter. Every social media app that comes out, you can only write this much. You could only post a picture. Your video could only be this long, and like you said, you lose context, you lose nuance, you lose the conversation. And I don't know if you've ever read Nicholas Carr. He wrote a book called The Shallows, and there's an article he wrote called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And it has some really cool and interesting ideas in it. He does not argue that Google is making us stupid, by the way. It's just kind of a hook title. Yeah. But he gets into that idea of us becoming pancake people, I believe was one of the quotes from the article, that we are just, not diving deep anymore. And we're kind of happy with just the surface knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's, I urge anyone out there who's interested, it doesn't have to be Star Trek, but it can be. And it doesn't have to be something like one of my favorite movies, The Man Who Would Be King, but watch television and film from the 60s and the 70s. Because I think my ability to just jump into the original series of Star Trek was because I have been watching older movies. And so I'm not, like, the pacing of a television sitcom, even a 50-minute one from 1969, is not awkward to me.
Right.
Because I've watched films from that era. And so I think that's the other piece is, you're a teacher. And I'm sure you talk to your students about being well-rounded. Because that's what I heard for my entire, educational career. And so I think that the other piece of that is not just the subject matter, but also the time period.
Sure.
And so reading a book, even if it's similar to the one you just read, but that was published in 1960, the pacing's different. And just that alone changes your attention span, I think, is seeing that, is experiencing that pacing, whether it's TV, movies, or books. And so that's the other piece to all of this. But yeah, I just don't want to see conversation go away.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, and that is why something like this is so important. And also why I had an inkling that even though I was asking a question about if you'd ever stop, I kind of felt like, at least in this medium, when you get to meet someone new every couple weeks, and when you get to have all these different conversations, it certainly could happen that you would lose interest, but it's probably not going to happen for a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm approaching 100, and I've thought about like stopping, like taking a break, but like I do 2 of these a month. Like what's what do I need? Like, I need a full, like, cause I basically, like, if I plan it out properly, I'm about planning. I can take 2 weeks off without worrying about and missing a beat. What, I need 3 weeks? Like, I don't know in what scenario that's important. Like that extra week is like make or break, but I refuse to put out something I'm not passionate about. So as long as that passion remains, it'll be indefinite, and it'll just move to something else. Like, I mean, as we talked about, like, I don't, that passion will just end up somewhere else. I don't think it'll go away. I think that's a whole different ball game, but like, I just feel like, all right, so maybe you'll end up getting more writing from me. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, the creative energy, that's one of those things I wonder about sometimes, is like is there a reserve of this stuff that I'm going to run out of at some point? But I
hope not.
I hope not too. But I used to do a lot of YouTube videos, and I kind of lost interest in it because it wasn't fulfilling, really.
Okay.
And I funneled all that energy into something else. That was when it was before that, but I was like, I've never sculpted before. Let's check this out. Why not? And I grab a hunk of clay and just start messing around. I'm like, you know what? I like this. Keep doing it.
I talk people out of podcasting and blogging all the time, which is weird for somebody who likes it so much. But I'm a big proponent of, if you're doing it for yourself, you will be successful. Look, if one person listens to this episode, that's fine. I think you and I had a good time, and that's good enough for me. Like, I'm going to edit this and put it together, and it's going to come out, and I'm going to be proud of it. And if one person hits it, fine. If 100,000, sure, fine. But I'm not going to be disappointed. I think I'm creating to create. And I think that you need that genuine article, so to speak, so that way you're not being like, I'm creating this so 100,000 people will see it, and if 900,000,
failure.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
every creator holds within them a at differing ratios, partly personal
satisfaction.
Thank you. Personal satisfaction, personal fulfillment, and public consumption. I think most creatives, to a degree, and again, the ratio is going to be different for everyone, but to a degree, most creatives want someone to see what they create, even if it's their husband, wife, their children. And I usually think that personal fulfillment part of it is stronger in most of us. Not all of us. I don't like extreme, so I'm never going to say every.
Yeah, well, that's why I end up talking people out of it, because I'm like, oh, great, you've got an idea for a podcast. Tell me about episode 10. And they're like, oh, no, I only have 2 in mind. It's like, all right, well, clearly you need to work on some stuff. All right, Jason, do you have one final question for me?
I do. Don't you feel grateful that you have a friend who can point out your terrible taste in movies?
So the thing is, I don't think we need anything to discuss, right? Like, I don't think we need a reason to argue. I think we would manufacture a reason to argue.
We're nerds. This is the whole thing. It's what we do.
And it truly wouldn't matter if we were arguing about Star Wars, or now that I'm into Star Trek, it doesn't matter, because for you and me,
yes,
we know what it comes back to.
Oh yeah,
always and forever.
Yes,
always Tom Bombadil.
That's where it started.
It's where it started, and it will never go away. It will never disappear. Because even though I will acknowledge I love those films, I will still say, where's Tom? Okay?
Yeah.
So that will never go away.
Yes.
However, I think that on a whole, one of the things that makes our friendship unique is that we spend a lot of time apart for best friends, which means you see quite a few movies that I don't.
Yeah.
And I see quite a few movies that you don't. And we're not talking like just new releases. You went to the movies and then I went to the movies. I'm just talking like in general over like the past probably, 10 years, the amount of movies we've both seen, and the amount of movies we both haven't seen is probably more that I've seen one and you haven't, and you've seen one and I haven't. That's just the way it lines up. And it allows us to have vastly different perspectives on the things we have seen together. Now, there are some tropes within our argument.
Oh, yes.
And as this will be coming out in the spring-ish of 2023, I can state unequivocally that I cannot wait to sit in the theater next to you for Indiana Jones 5. I cannot wait. You hated Crystal Skull so bad that I am so excited to see the fedora on the big screen with you for 5.
I hope it's good. Like, look, anyone who's a fan of Indy, it's one of those. It's an empty gesture. It's a prayer that will most likely fall upon deaf ears. But I want it to be good. I do. I just think that the poor guy. Come on, just let the poor man hang up his fedora with pride. Like, do we have to drag him back out at this point
Sure
in his age?
Oh,
like,
yeah. Of course we do.
But what?
Because you know what? This is a thing that I have a suspicion that Indiana Jones is going to die or go away. I don't mean die. Like, I don't know what happens in the movie, but I get the feeling that the franchise is going to go away. I think that with Indiana Jones as a property, as a franchise, we're going to see it get locked in a vault for a long time. I do not see them finding somebody. This isn't James Bond. I don't see it that way. I don't see somebody else just putting on the fedora. I see this going away for 10, 20 years. And then somebody's like, you know what we should bring out of the vault? I think this is where Disney's vault concept gets used. I really do.
But they haven't. Now, here's the thing. A lot of the stuff that was put into the vault was just made into live actions.
But after so long, right? And so I think it creates look, okay? We have a tough time with the prequels. Okay, the Star Wars prequels, we have a tough time with. And you were in that theater, the same theater I was on for that midnight showing. But one of the things that you have to admit is that regardless of its initial reception or how we look back on it, there was such a fervor about it because it had been 15 years, 16 years, right? And so I think that for Indy, maybe it's a little different. I don't think this movie has that fervor because, like, not only had Crystal Skull happened, but, like, we've been hearing about 5 for a long time.
Well, it's another one of those things that was affected by...
It's not a dead zone. And I feel like the one thing you need to do for Indy as a franchise is you need it to be you need that dead zone where nobody's talking about 7, 6, 5, whatever. You know, nobody's talking about the next one. Just let it go. Let it go. Also, I feel like the powers that be have got to be seeing the diminishing returns on some of these movies.
Yes.
Marvel movies are going down because it's getting too complicated to keep track of it. The Fast and the Furious franchise also, they keep making the movies, but guess what? The total box office is going down because even if you make every movie in a franchise stand alone, when you call something Fast X as the 10th movie in the franchise, some moviegoers will go, well, I haven't seen 5 or I haven't seen 9. And so there's a diminishing returns with that. You need to sunset the property, let it take a nice deserved decade off, and then maybe bring it back.
Maybe. Yeah, some things are, it's okay to end. It's okay to have it.
Oh my God, it's all right to have, of course it's all right to have an ending.
Yeah.
God, if we didn't have endings, you could never begin something new.
This is correct. Wiser words never said.
I hate that's a proverb that or a fucking platitude. Fortune cookie wisdom here on the Palmer Files. All right, Dad, do you have one final question for me?
I do. And my final question for you goes back a bit.
Okay.
When you came back from Israel.
Yeah.
At the end of your what would have been your junior year of high school.
Yep.
And we told you that the likelihood of you going back to your high school was not likely.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when we had that summer when we were going through that?
So there are two pieces to this. Because there are actually 3 pieces. The first is the social aspect. I didn't care. Like it's really hard to go back to that. But like one of the reasons I didn't care was because Zapata is my best friend and he was a year ahead of me.
And he was already gone.
And he had just graduated. And there were other people in that crew that I was the youngest kid in the crew I hung out with. So I was closer to the people that were not going to be in high school anymore. So from a social aspect, it didn't matter as much. The other piece of it, which scared the crap out of me, was the possibility of, because there were 2 other possibilities if I didn't go back, and it was a private school or a college with an early acceptance. Mm-hmm. The private school scared me because I didn't want to start over for a year. Mm-hmm. The college excited me because it felt like what I had just gotten back from. But the before the acceptance letter came, I was just like, I don't know if the devil I don't know for a year is better than just going back. And so we didn't talk about that because luckily things just worked out in a timely manner. Like we didn't have to rush or anything.
You got offered you got offered acceptance at your interview.
I did. And I still don't know what I said.
I have no idea
because
what you said
it was
either,
me. You
I
weren't.
know.
I mean, I
know it was you
it was just me in there with the
dean of
dean of admissions. Although the dean of admissions retired like 14 months later, so there is a possibility that he was like, "Well, I'm not going to be here, so what does it matter?"
I don't think he thought that way.
Okay, fair enough. But there was a little bit of scaredness for if it didn't happen the way it did. Because going to a private school was a bit scary to start over for 1 year. And like, I think I had the conversation with somebody at one point, which was because I had a few smart friends at the time that were like, well, you just did a semester kind of starting over all by yourself. But I didn't see that as valuable because everybody that was on that trip had done a semester by themselves. I wasn't going to be dropped into year 12 of 1 for me and 5, 10, 12 for everybody else. Right. So the best situation is what happened. Mm-hmm. The other situations I was not scared of, but more nervous about.
Okay.
Because it was just like I didn't know how that would be. But I will ask you, I presume you would have jumped at the opportunity at that age to go overseas?
I don't know. But the difference was my mother probably wouldn't have liked me leaving for that period of time.
Okay. My mother didn't.
The Italian mother, it's a little bit different.
Okay.
It's a different generation. You got to remember that.
Was it okay? But
different generation.
It's a different generation.
And exchange programs weren't nearly as popular or as well known as they were when you went.
But how much of it would have also been that you were the oldest?
Not much.
Okay, that wouldn't have mattered as much?
I don't think it would have mattered.
Okay.
No. And you got to remember, I went to a high school different than my 3 brothers did.
Okay.
So I was the outlier in a lot of different ways anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunity. I still think it's one of those weird I look at early admittance to Keystone the same way I look at going to Israel, which is you and Mom helped facilitate it once it happened, but I feel like it literally fell into those opportunities. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't seek them out necessarily. Keystone maybe more than Israel, but like these were just situations that kind of happened to me.
Well, there were things that happened to you that people saw a solution for you, not necessarily us, but significant people that we knew saw a solution for you that worked out for the best.
Yeah, but I fell into these, and it's one of the reasons that I don't like the sailing metaphor of like just you go where the wind takes you, but it kind of feels like that's the way it's been. Like how I ended up working for you the last time was that somebody left at the right time, which happened to be 2 years after I had started a business that gave me the skills to fill that position.
Right.
There's like, if that happens a year prior where I have a lot less experience or a year after, maybe that doesn't happen.
Right.
And so like I've had everybody has a lot of happenstance, but all the major events have had just an inordinate amount of like, had the die roll gone a different way.
Serendipity is an awesome thing. And in a lot of ways, serendipity has made you a big part of what you are today.
Yeah.
And without that serendipity, we wouldn't be here right now.
And I mean, you get some credit for that too.
To a degree. Yeah. And, we don't say this enough.
Yeah.
But we're proud of the person you have become.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, I love you.
I love you too.
And thus we have completed One Final Question, Volume 4. And while this has happened 3 times before and will no doubt happen again and again and again, it's nice to revisit these things from time to time. I will say that in the episodes since 100, and generally speaking, when I talk to other writers, bloggers, and podcasters, when we're in it, we're in it. We don't often take time to look back, but that's exactly what these episodes force me to do. And I could do a better job taking time to stop and look around and see what's going on. I understand that I have a very unique and minority position on vacations, and that's because in the society we have today, you often, in salaried positions, have to work ahead and extra to prepare to go away, and then you have to work extra to catch up when you return. I'm not a big proponent of that, but I am all about that random day off, especially if you use it to reflect on where you are and where you've been. That's what these episodes are to me. They allow me to see what's been, where I'm at, and, well, I know what's coming still, so I can see in all 3 directions. You too should take some time for yourself and do some reflections. Again, maybe not on a vacation, just take a random day off and go for a walk, listen to some music, spend some time away from all the connected things. You may be more refreshed than you'd think. So thank you for listening to episode 122 of the Palmer Files. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and my guests, Kelly, Jimmy, Travis, Chris, Tony, Zapata, and my dad, in the show notes. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heiter. Email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. Do I have one final question for myself? I do not. But I want to put something back here. There needs to be something here. Consistency is very important. And so you just heard a bunch of one final questions, and now I'm rambling, which is what I did at the end of the other one final questions and a couple of the solo episodes. And there may be some solo episodes coming, and I'm going to have to figure out what to put back here. Outtakes would be great, but, me messing up the intro and the outro is not as fun as maybe me messing up different parts of a 45-minute thing. So I'm just going to ramble here, which is what I've already been doing. So I'm, mission accomplished. I don't know what's coming in the future as far as guests. I know who the next 3 guests are. I know who actually the next 5 are. But I'm going to say this. There is a part of me that wants to spend a little more time recording friends and family. Because if I'm being honest, I don't know them that well. I know my immediate family very well. Mom, dad, my chosen brethren. That's probably it. And so there's a chance for some maybe listener accountability. You can hold me accountable to this. I will be having some other people that have known me for 10 or 20 years or 30 or my whole life that will be on this show upcoming, if they're willing. so I can actually get to know them. Because selfishly, when you hang out with extended family or, friends of the family, it's usually just, hey, what have you been up to the last little bit? What's going on? It's not a lot. It's not in depth. Just the other day, somebody I've known for almost a decade who owns his own business, I went, why'd you start that? Apparently, it's a story I'd never gotten. There's a lot I don't know about the people around me, and I'm going to use this platform as a way to explore some of that with you in the hopes that it will get you to ask some of these questions about some of your own extended family, because I think we can all be better. Just in general, we can all be better. So now that I've hit my soapbox moment, I'm actually going to get down from this soapbox and, stop recording, I guess. So thank you very much for listening to the end, the very end. And, we'll continue this journey together, shall we? Yeah, let's do it.